All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our live event, live from the studio with TanTan Hong. Just before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that Griffin Art Projects is situated on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations, and that we are very honored and grateful to undertake our work here. I'd also like to invite anyone as we meet in this virtual space, if they would like to share land acknowledgement from where they're currently situated in the chat. Also like to note that we are enabling live captioning for today's event. So if you would like to enable that on your end, you can press the CC live transcription button at the bottom of your screen. Do note, however, that's not perfect and it does struggle particularly with place and people names, but we hope that it will be useful in capturing most of what we're saying today. And lastly, if you are experiencing any technical issues with the Zoom interface, we will also be live streaming today's event on our Facebook page, which you can see the link there, or if you just type in Griffin Art Projects in your Facebook search bar, it'll take you there as well. And lastly, just before we get started, I would also like to mention that we will be having a bit of a Q&A session at the end of today's event. So if you want to share any questions or input, you can paste that into the Q&A box, which you'll notice is separate from the chat. It just helps to keep things a little more organized on that end. And we will get to that at the end. And also, if you would like to ask your question aloud, you can indicate that and we'll unmute you for that portion as well. We are in a webinar format, so just be aware, and we're also recording. So you will want to just be aware of that. If you do want your voice, it will be recorded and archived later. So I'm happy to now introduce our participant for today's talk, TanTan Hong. So TanTan is a multimedia installation artist, bookmaker, and educator from South Korea. Her practice has been based in Seoul, Hong Kong, LA, and now in Vancouver. Her practice and research concern microorganisms, memories, and world building, where worlds connect the in-between spaces of fictional and historical landscapes birthed by American imperialism. TanTan holds a BFA from Cal Arts and an MFA from Emily Carr. I would also like to note that while she is also the artist in residence at Griffin, she is also the recipient of Griffin's Emily Carr University of Art and Design Educational Outreach Fellowship, which is an award recognizing the achievements of a distinguished MFA student at Emily Carr, connecting them with local youth through a series of workshops and studio visits. So with that, I'll pass things over to TanTan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. In today's presentation, I'll be guiding through my processes and works I've been working on during this residency at Griffin Arts. And before I like to start, I would like to thank everyone in the team of Griffin Arts for making this possible and all the efforts to putting this together. So I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay. So before we get into learning about what my practice is at its current state, I would like to give a quick review of the works that have brought me to where I am in my practice. This piece is from 2016, and it's called Grandpa's Garden, and it was part of my mid-residency while I was at Cal Arts. And this work stemmed from my own personal experiences as I mourned the loss of my grandfather. Within this installation, as you walk in, you could see a persimmon tree and smaller trees in and out of its own pots, and a platform TV that is continuously playing a performance piece called How to Become a Dead Bonsai. And surrounding the performance piece, you would find pieces of books called Making Yourself into a Bonsai Tree. And these works were carefully made by hand through tangling of wires and putting plaster on throughout the time, and it was carefully put together one by one individually. And as you can see, the plants had their own platforms, and they were kind of made into an altar shape to understand the processes of mourning and what it means and how I was going through at that time. And this is the performance piece that I did for turning myself into a bonsai tree, where I spent about 30 minutes tying myself with wire and putting plaster on and trying to understand and mimic the processes of becoming a bonsai tree within understanding the layers of making restraining of life. And as you can see on the landscapes, the floor is covered with astroturf. And for me, the astroturf really mimicked the permanence of nature that we try to involve by bringing that into a inside space. And this piece is called The Home They Make Me Think I'm Going Home To. This was an installation that I exhibited for my thesis show at CalArts in 2018. And before you go into the show, the audience was made to sign a consent form, being aware that this was a post-nuclear landscape and they would be kind of exposed to radiation and what comes into while entering a nuclear landscape. So that's my way of getting the audience engaged with a parafictional landscape. And after the audience had signed the consent form, they were given these suits that we're very normalized to now because of COVID, and we're very aware that they were protection gear. But at the time of the show, a lot of the audience were not aware of what these gears were. So they were putting them on, and the audience was kept to about 20 people at a time while entering the show. So they could spend as long as they wanted to. And as the audience walked into a rice-filled room and then in their protection gear, every audience had a very different relationship to the work, and an audience who was willing to give their time to the show would notice different elements that were behind the walls and inside the well that was filled with flour. But while you were digging, while the audience was digging through the flour itself, they would find notes of handwritten notes that were describing the home that the idea of home that I actually intended, and instead of the landscape that I created, which was a reflection of how American media and Western media, especially depicts Korea, the Korean Peninsula and the division of North and South Korea. And as someone who is from Korea, the landscape that I am from was heavily used by Western countries as a war field to understand their own politics. So, and that still bleeds onto the times now. So this work really stemmed for me to understand that kind of position. And it's one of the works that still influences me the most and how I understand my audience and where the work is being shown. So this work really helped me understand those things. And now moving on to TanTan's Garden. This work has started in 2018 as well, but it's something that I'm still working on. And TanTan's Garden is a research-based practice deeply rooted in the creation and dissections of a fictional world. TanTan's Garden is a metaphorical parallel universe birthed by the effects that American imperialism had on the Korean Peninsula, the Korean culture, and the Korean diaspora. The work discusses the creation of this world along with the studies of its landscape, its historical ecology. The creative processes manifest itself through critical analysis of histories and creative approaches to world building, bookmaking, letter writing, collages, drawing, storytelling, object making, and video documentary. At the same time, the practice mutates itself into narratives of science fiction and notions of post-humanism. I am heavily interested in how vulnerability, fermented memories, and the processes of mourning can be utilized to explore the radiating violence of American imperialism. The works in TanTan's garden invite you to a fictional world in which the personal insights and intimate effects of being a byproduct of American imperialism can be explored. In the beginnings of exploring TanTan's garden, I found myself going back to the practice of drawing. Before I was drawn to making installations or sculpture works, as you have seen in the earlier part of the presentation, but as I was making this work, COVID happened during my school time, and it kind of, at first it seemed like a limitation, but I found myself working with what was near and surrounding me and what I could source at the time. And it got me thinking a lot about what making work is about and what materiality is about. And this gave me the space to test, understand the material and the process instead of having a goal of having a finished product. And during the residency, I really got a chance to take the time to understand what the works I have been creating while expanding the world of TanTan's garden. And being at the residency, I was given the opportunity to really have the space to kind of open up my works instead of, and looking at them one by one instead of looking at them in an exhibition style, which really brought in the different aspects that the works were embodying, like their vulnerability. And during this residency, it really gave me the time to notice that TanTans were becoming more themselves and embodying their vulnerability without the existence of the landscape like they used to before, which is their home. So those notions came to me as a surprise and kind of liberated my work from what I was working on in the past that have revolved around the home as a space. And I'm kind of beginning to work beyond that. They are starting to create their own environments and gaining their own agency without the turbulence of having to be at home, in which I was really struggling with in the beginning of opening the world of TanTan's garden to the world. And I got to go back and really work on the ideas of painting during this residency as well, which I found as a surprise because I really distanced myself from that practice as I was very traditionally trained in the Korean traditional way of going to art school, which starts from drawings and sculptural drawings, and then you kind of move on to acrylic painting, and then you can reach a point of oil paintings. So I was, during my time at CalArts, I was really drawn away from that kind of traditional practice. But this, now during this time at the residency, I really found myself wanting to go back to the medium that I started exploring in and kind of expanding and learning to find my own style within TanTan's garden. So I'm really open to kind of exploring it more, and I'm currently working on 2 more other bigger paintings that kind of speak to me as drawings as well, which is really exciting. After finishing my residency, I'm at a point of my work where, like the persimmons that I have shown in my drawings, the works themselves are becoming more sweet than the bitter form that they had in the beginning, where I was trying to understand and trying to not be a byproduct of the American imperialism, but now I'm learning to find the sweet spot and what I was understanding the times and the struggles that I had of introducing this work. But I think I was letting people taste the works a little too early in a process where they could only be seen bitter, but as time ages, the fruit, it will become sweeter, and I'm hoping it will take its time to dry into something that lasts forever and has a taste of home and memory, just like the persimmon trees from my grandpa's garden. Thank you for coming to my artist talk, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tantan. So yeah, just a reminder to everybody, you can post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the toolbar. I think I'll just get us started here. So heading into Tantan's garden, it's always interesting to me when artists have a multi-year project, and it sounds like you're open to this kind of continuing onwards. And I did like the kind of metaphor that you had at the end about the bitterness and the sweetness of persimmon fruit ripening. So moving forward, how do you kind of foresee, if you can kind of imagine how it might evolve in the next few years, where do you see Tantan's garden going?
I see TanTan's garden continuing to expand itself. I'm not sure if it's going to continue itself in the parafictional world or it's going to continue itself in more of a fictional realm. But I'm kind of ready to see it ferment itself and kind of give that time to see where it goes. But I think it's going to have its more agency than the landscape that it depends on.
Right. And something else that you've noted a few times in your talk is the idea of materiality. And having worked alongside you with some of the workshops you've been facilitating, I've noticed that sustainability and sustainable practices and materials are a big part of your work as well. So I was wondering if you can maybe speak to that, and if that's something that you find is crucial to your work, and if you would kind of hope to continue working in sustainable materials moving forward.
So sustainable materiality is something that I really found a lot within the last 2 years. Before then, I wasn't really thinking about it while I was making my sculptures. They were very heavily plaster, which is not recyclable. And they were kind of one-off objects that were made for that space. But during this time, I was at home and I had to use materials that weren't harmful to people I live with and myself. So I kind of pivoted to that. And I was researching how toxic and unrecyclable art materials are, and how those objects and recyclable objects are kind of pivoted to the craft area. So I wanted to kind of blur those notions of what is craft and what isn't. And that's why I kind of went in. But I'm also really interested into making my own paper clay, as I've demonstrated in our educational programs. So
And on note with those educational programs, I mean, obviously you're an artist, bookmaker, person who imagines worlds. But as an educator, what do you bring as an educator that would maybe differ from what you bring as an artist? And does the educating component ever inform your practice as an artist?
the education component always informs me as an artist, I think, because I'm getting to know my audience in a very different way. And I'm learning about the audience while I'm teaching them. But at the end of the day, I'm always really awed at how much I learn from at those individual experiences. And I'm really open to sharing my materiality and how that processes come through. And one of the surprising things is that a lot of the students have these notions of what is fine art and what isn't. And I feel like through my workshops, I'm really engaging in breaking those boundaries, especially to high school students who feel like the art world is really gatekept.
Right.
So,
We do have a question here in the chat. Hi, Tantan. I'm so interested in the change in your practice during the residency and how you have returned to your training form in art school in Korea. Can you speak a bit more about what this comprised of, how it has changed, and what are these practices all intertwining and working together?
in the beginning, after my traditional training, I was really burnt out from making really photographical work as like photorealism, and that's kind of very memorized compositions and how art should be in a Western point of view that's understood by the East, and how that kind of training is valued. So I was really drawn back from that, and I I went through a process in my life where I was kind of against that kind of practice. And I was really focused on making abstract shapes and understanding content rather than the technique. So at my time during the residency, I think those things, I'm coming to terms that those things can coexist together. And it's really nice to understand my practice without internal turbulence. I hope that answers your question.
I'm also curious, having lived in Seoul, Hong Kong, LA, Vancouver, three pretty big metropolises, three pretty unique art scenes on the global scale. And you also reference American imperialism throughout your work and how that's kind of changed a little bit, particularly in the past year or so in your work. I'm curious how both maybe these different arts communities in these big cities or the art scene on the whole has impacted your work or maybe your perspective on the art world and how that shift maybe changed in American imperialism in regards to your work, particularly since you've been living in North America.
Living in Hong Kong, capitalism's very in your face, and it's a city that's very involved in its high art and fine art scene. So, but then that was very limited to the public. So I wasn't as exposed to art world when I was there than when I moved to the States. But while being in Hong Kong and moving around that I did, I was really highly aware of what globalization was and how that connects into this art world that we have and how that continues with supply chains and how it really stemmed from and began and sped up after World War II and the Korean War and the development of these countries and how and why I'm even studying in North America. So those things are continuously influencing me, and being on this side of the world, I see the influences that I couldn't see back when I was in Asia, but I also miss seeing the perspectives that I couldn't see about North America when I was there. So I think the influences are in both places and constantly affecting me.
Mm-hmm. Now that you've graduated from your MFA program, what's next for you? I know you probably continuously are planning to continue working on TanTan's garden. Was there anything else or anything along the horizon?
I'm still really focused on expanding my practice, and I'm really interested in going forward with teaching as well. So both aspects I'm constantly working on, and I'll see how TanTan's garden ferments.
Great. Well, I have no more questions for you. Maybe I'll just do a little housekeeping. If anyone wants to get a quick one into the chat here, feel free to, and we can circle back. So I do just want to remind everybody that coming up in December, we have our Combine Art Fair happening here at Griffin Art Projects. So for a change up, it's not a virtual event. It's actually going to be an in-person event, and it's going to be hosted in partnership with four emerging gallerists here in Vancouver. And it will just kind of be, kind of celebrating collections and art gallerists. So we welcome you to come by. That'll be happening from December 2nd to December 5th. And in conjunction with that event, we'll be having a panel discussion that will be happening on December 5th. And that will be hosted virtually. So if you wanted to join us for that, that'll be happening at 1 p.m. And more information and registration for both those events can be found on Griffin's website. I'll also remind everybody that our current exhibition, Teeth Loan Trust Company Consolidated, the Trilowski collection, will be continuing to be open to the public until December 11th. So our hours here are Friday through Sunday, 12 p.m. noon to 5 p.m. So we welcome you to stop by for that as well. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us here today. It's a beautiful Sunday afternoon here in Vancouver, so I hope everyone gets to enjoy a little bit of sunshine. And yeah, thank you, TanTan, so much. we'll be seeing each other soon as we kind of continue with the educational component of your residency and starting to plan the exhibition at the end of the month, heading into December and January. So thanks so much and take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.